had not realized it had been so long since I put Studman shoes on, but when I came to the barn and found he was missing one, I looked at my calendar and it has been 8 whole weeks since I put this pair on. Setting glue on shoes can be a tricky business, and 8 weeks is a very long time for them to stay on before one falls off. This set is the first I have put on Studman this season, so I thought I'd show you guys how I take these off. These are the Easy Care Speeds. They are pretty new. I really like them. This one is still pretty solid on his foot, so I do have to pry off the cuffs with my nippers, and then I'm gonna have to shimmy this shoe off. I've tried out a lot of different brands of composite shoes, and the Easy Care ones have always been my favorite. Every time I try a new pair of shoes and there's something that I don't quite like about it, it seems like they have a new model out, fixing every concern that I've had. Here is a close-up of what this shoe looks like. It is a little bit on the muddy side. We did have some pretty big storms yesterday, but you can see the glue is pretty evenly spaced on the cuffs. There's a little spot where there was glue missing, but that really wasn't too big of a deal given how long these were able to stay on. Studman was foundered when I got him, so I have been working pretty hard to get his feet back to normal. His feet tend to get a little bit flat and splatty still with his heels running forward. I could continue to leave him barefoot, but I want to be a little bit more aggressive in his rehab, so putting a shoe on top of a fresh trim is really going to help him. With the protection of this shoe, I'll be able to take him a little bit shorter and hopefully make some better improvements on his feet over a shorter period of time. I really shouldn't have let him go for 8 weeks before I pulled these shoes off. It does look like his foot is starting to run forward again. I was planning to reset these shoes today, but with his foot being so wet, I might have to let it dry out for a day or two. I cleaned out his foot as best I could, and from here you can see he is growing a bit more heel. The big arena is quite dry and sandy, so I'm going to turn him out on that this morning, and hopefully that will pull all the moisture out of his hoof. Typically, when I leave Studman barefoot, he does have a little bit of sensitivity on gravel and hard rocks just because his feet are so flat. He was a stallion when I bought him, and he has gotten quite a dad bod since he's been gelded. He doesn't run around nearly as much, and part of that is I think his feet are a little bit uncomfortable when he is barefoot. This morning it does look like, with all the extra growth on his foot, that he's moving quite nicely. The first order of business is, of course, marking his arena with a fresh pile of poop. This is probably one of the nicest features of buying a horse that has been a stud for a while. They typically are very tidy in their stall and turnout. Studman is the kind of horse that I honestly would not be able to afford the rehab on if I couldn't do my own farrier care. I really was struggling to get a farrier out every 4 weeks to help me with these trickier rehabs. Composite shoes have been around for a very long time, but they are still not very well accepted in some places in Montana. Farriers that do put them on do charge quite a bit of money too. They will run between $250 to $500 for a set, so 2 shoes. A few years ago, I got really into rehabbing horses with navicular and ones with laminitis or that have foundered. Learning more about the glue-on options has really helped me expand the amount of horses that I'm able to help. It looks like Studman is a tiny bit sore trotting around. I'm gonna have to wait until he's done with this turnout, but there was one spot on his foot that looked like it may be abscessing. With all the moisture we've been having in the ground, it is a little bit easy for mud and stuff to get up under the shoes sometimes. I typically like to put some kind of pour-in pad on or a dental impression material just to fill the space so that doesn't happen. With this being his first set of shoes for the year, I decided not to do that this time. Hopefully his feet will dry up nicely and I'll be able to reset his shoes in a day or two. With all the rain, the grass has just been growing a crazy amount, so I've been having to mow a ton. I don't really mind too much because the pastures are looking fabulous right now. I think I'll be able to keep them out on pasture until probably November, hopefully December this year. It looks like Tiny is finally awake and making her morning rounds. Nigel and Frisco Bill usually enjoy their second breakfast together. I finally got all the kinks worked out with their mash, so they are eating all of their breakfast in the morning and all of their dinner at night. The shoes that Studman had on, I am going to reset, so I do have to clean up all of the old glue and dirt. This is the one that fell off, and it does look like there is quite a bit of mud and stuff packed in. The glue that I like to use for these shoes is a urethane adhesive. Some of these Easy Care shoes you can actually use straight up super glue. I know a lot of people like to use a resin that I'm not particularly a fan of. It gets extremely hot and I am allergic to it if I get it on my skin. So this urethane stuff works the best for me and the environment that the horses are in. It is also super easy just to peel off when you are finally ready to reset the shoes. I did dye these shoes special for Studman. It was kind of a pain in the butt and I don't think I'll do it again. I am really impressed that these stayed on so long. I think it's the longest I've ever had any of the glue-on shoes stay on. Now that I've got the majority of the glue cleaned off of these shoes, I'm going to go ahead and wash the mud off of them. I'm going to continue chores, and I spy the little mama robin that I've been keeping an eye on. Her babies are still in the nose of my horse trailer, and I'm patiently waiting for them to evacuate so I can go places this summer. They are growing up super fast, and hopefully they'll fledge soon.
Skeletor! Skelly!
Skeletor was on the list to get some glue-on shoes. However, he is growing again, and I need to be able to make little tweaks to his feet pretty often. He also has a hoof that tends to grow forward, and his heels get really underrun. His feet do not get sore though, so he doesn't actually need to have shoes. When I brought Studman in, you can see that his hoof is really dry and the sand did a good job of cleaning off most of the gunk that was on there. He didn't grow a whole lot of heel, but it is a lot better than it was when I put the shoes on. I am a little bit suspicious that he has something going on in that foot, so I am going to treat it for thrush, and hopefully in a day or two it'll be dried up completely and I will be able to put a shoe on top of that. I know other people like different potions and powders, but this stuff in my opinion works the best for what I'm using it for. The boys are done with their time on pasture for the day, so I'm going to put them back in their dry lot. One of the perks to understanding how to put on glue-on shoes is you can wait a few days in between resetting them, and it's not a huge deal to have the farrier come back out. Unfortunately, Studman did have a little bit of a corn in one of his heels, so I did have to wait quite a long time before I was ready to actually reset his shoes. I am going to reset his old ones, but I did order a bunch of pairs of different styles I haven't tried yet. This is the model that a lot of people use plain old super glue with. I'm going to try these on Frisco Bill, I think. They have a little rock guard in the middle, which I usually cut off. They don't come on the speed version, which is the version Studman gets. Just a little bit different of a design. Studman. It is really hot today, so the horses are enjoying being inside the barn underneath the fans. I do notice that Studman doesn't weight his feet the same when he has shoes on. I have been dealing with some metabolic concerns with him as long as I've had him, and I think I need to step up his diet a little bit more. You can see this is the foot where he had that corn that was draining a little bit. It actually broke completely off, so I do need to rebalance his foot and do a little bit of trimming on him before he gets his shoes. He is still run forward a little bit, but that should get better with every reset that I do of these glue-on shoes. Just to refresh your memory, this is what his foot looked like when I very first bought him, so there has been an incredible amount of improvement. It seems like Studman is really not impressed with all of my poking today. He seems like he's pretty tired just because of the heat. This is what his foot looked like after I did some rebalancing to it. The quality of his foot is indicative of a horse that does have some metabolic problems, so I am probably going to be a little bit more serious about his diet this summer. He has not been out on grass at all, and he's still getting a ration balancer, but I'm probably going to cut that out and just give him bulk minerals instead. Here is his other foot before the trim. It has dried up quite a bit, and there is a little bit of length that needs to come off. When I first got him, you could literally push on the sole of his foot and it would move because it was so thin and fragile, and they have toughened up quite a bit. I do think these composite shoes are really good for horses that have thin soles. You can put a pour-in pad in, and a lot of them will be really sound in them, so you can continue riding them if that is what you wish. I've given Studman a lot of time off while his feet have been getting better. In hindsight, it might have been better for me to actually work him so he could get the exercise. He is a little bit on the flabby side, and I don't think that that is really helping with his foot situation. I am really happy with the improvements that I've made to his feet so far, so once he gets this set of shoes back on, I will be starting in with his training. These shoes do need to have a little bit more cleaning before I put them on his feet, but I do need to check the fit just to make sure these are still the correct size for him. The very first set of these shoes I ever put on him, he was 2 sizes bigger, and that's just because his foot was so flat and splatty. These purple ones are still the correct size for him. I think maybe in a couple more resets he might be ready for a smaller shoe. Because the last set of shoes lasted 8 weeks, I did have to take off a bit of flare that probably would not have been there had I reset him sooner. I really like the way these cuffs fit on their hoof, and the speed you can actually put on and pick up their feet, and they can walk around without them falling off completely. So you can do a lot of things before you actually glue them onto the hoof. I do have to do a little bit more cleaning on these shoes. I'm going to use some alcohol, some gauze, and then I'm going to prep his feet with some sandpaper. There are a lot of tutorials about how to put on this type of shoe online, and everybody makes it look so easy. I've only ever put on about 24 pairs of these specific shoes, so I'm maybe half decent at it right now. I think these shoes are a good option for someone that does know how to correctly trim their horse's feet and can put a shoe on and have it be straight and balanced. I know a lot of farriers out here do not like composites because owners end up just trying to slap them on themselves, and then they do have a lot of problems to fix. But for someone like me who has been trimming my own horses for a very long time, these composite glue-on shoes are a game changer. I no longer have to wait for a farrier to come out and help me get these horses shod. I really don't need to buy a ton of equipment to get these shoes on. And if I ever really mess them up, they are pretty easy to just take off and try again. I think if my back was in a better state that I would really enjoy going to farrier school to get some more knowledge on making traditional shoes. But for the kind of horses that I am currently helping, these glue-on composite shoes really have made a difference. A horse like Studman probably wouldn't tolerate a normal shoe being hammered onto his foot. They are pretty strong now, but when I first got him, the quality of his foot would definitely not have held a shoe on. Since it's so dry and hot here, I am using some alcohol to prep his foot. Some people will use a torch to dry it. I have tried that and it actually works better here if I use the alcohol, so that's what I've been doing. I want to make sure these bad boys are on straight, so I'm just going to mark the shoe and mark his hoof in case I get in the throes of gluing and he squirms around. I want to make sure this is on straight. And as you can see, this is how I keep them in line. These shoes are actually designed so I could glue in through those tiny little holes on the cuffs, but for Studman, I have to do it a little bit differently because he does move around too much when I'm underneath him still. I'm going to make a few last minute preparations before I go ahead and glue these shoes on.
Zig. Ziggy.
It has been so long since I took his shoes off that Ziggy is now over in the barn. This is the urethane adhesive that I've been using that seems to work the best here. It stays a little bit flexible and I don't really have these shoes pop off very often. It does require a special tip to get both of the separate products mixed together so the glue will set properly. When I first started using these glue-on shoes, it can be very frustrating if you're doing it with a green or painful horse. Studman had never had his feet worked on before I bought him and he was 5 years old, so I've had to make a few modifications to this process to get it to work for him. Instead of putting the shoe on the hoof first, I do put the glue on and then slide it on and make sure it's in the right place and then just put his foot down. If I'm quick enough, I can pick up the glue gun again and then fill in any holes that may be left. The two most important things when I'm putting on this shoe is that it stays on his foot straight and balanced. I want to make sure I have enough glue that this thing is going to stay on. So the way the shoe looks is very low on my list of priorities. I probably should have worn some gloves, but I didn't make too big of a mess. If you wanted to save a bunch of glue and make the shoe look a whole lot nicer, you could wrap this in a saran wrap product after. Studman has had a lot of trouble with this, so I just leave it out completely. Here is what the little pieces of glue look like. Probably could have slapped on some gloves for this. I'm going to give him a few minutes for that shoe to actually set solid before I put the other one on. Since the glue in my other mixing tip has dried, I have to switch that out before I put on another shoe anyway. The second shoe is the first process as the same shoe, but it usually goes a little bit smoother because he does stand better once he has a shoe on. I get down and fill in all of the cracks as best I can before I'm either run out of glue or it becomes clogged in the nozzle. This glue usually has a 30-second set time, but I'm noticing because it's so hot, it is setting a lot faster today. It is right around 85 degrees today, so it was definitely more like a 20-second set time. Studman does tend to twist when he walks sometimes, so I'm gonna let him stand here for a couple minutes while I groom him just to make sure all of the glue is 100% set. I had someone ask why I was putting fake tails in my horses just to turn them out, and all of these horses have real tails. I like to think it's because of the good nutrition that they're getting, but their hair does grow extremely fast. They really don't get any crazy supplements or anything. I just balance their hay with minerals and they get all of the things that their body needs to grow nice hair. His hair is so strong that I'm actually having trouble cutting it with my knife, so I'm going to sharpen it up and see if I can get through it. I'm really happy with how good Studman is standing today. When I first got him, he really struggled to pick up his feet for more than a few seconds. I think that was because they were pretty painful. The longer I've had him, of course, the better he's gotten about handling his feet. I'm sure it probably helps that I do tend to trim him every 4 weeks when I'm able to. His hair is so thick that I am going to end up giving up and just finding a pair of scissors to cut it with. I know this is probably going to drive a lot of people crazy, but I like my horses to have tails a little bit on the shorter side. When they're running around out in the pasture, if they stop and turn and back up, they have the potential to rip out a lot of their hair. So I like to keep them nice and short. I thought I did a pretty good job of eyeballing how short I needed to cut Studman's tail, but when he finally moved after I cut it, I had a little bit of a panic attack. It looked nice right above his fetlocks, and then I moved him to get a better view, and it turned out to be quite a bit shorter than I was expecting. It's not really a huge deal. His tail will grow extremely fast, and I'll have to cut it again in probably a month or so. It seems like the glue has set on his shoes and they're pretty solid on his feet. I had gone back and forth about putting a pour-in pad on this set of shoes,
sorry,
but
buddy.
I am going to take them off in 4 weeks, and I do kind of want to see how they are without anything in them.
Zig.
Since I am gluing a bunch of shoes on today, I am potentially going to do Ziggy and Prim as well. I'm still kind of tightening up Ziggy's feet, so it's probably not the best time to fit him with the pair of shoes, but Prim's are looking really good, and I'm hoping to hit the trails with her after I get a few rides on her under saddle. Prim is a typical quarter horse. She does have feet that are a little bit on the smaller side. I have never put shoes on her. She has had really nice feet the entire time I've had her. She can get a tiny bit sore over big rocks, but it looks like her feet are in a pretty good state, and I decide against putting her shoes on.
All right.
Instead of putting a set of shoes on her today, I decide I'm going to take her for the first spin of
Frisco
the
Bill.
year. As usual, Frisco Bill is not happy about Prim in a different spot than she usually is. I give him a few scratches and a little ear rub before I head out to the arena with Prim. Since this is the first time I've crawled on Prim this year, I will probably only be away for 15 to 20 minutes with her, so Frisco Bill is just going to have to suck it up today. I know I've talked a little bit about selling Prim, but there's no timeline for that. I will wait until she's pretty broke. Prim has gone through my whole program to get a colt started under saddle. I just haven't started riding her yet. She stood still for mounting. I was able to bend her left and right, and then I took her for a few laps around the round pen before getting off. I just wanted her to have a really low-key, no-stress day before I went back in and checked on Studman's feet. Here is a closer look at the shoes. There is a pretty big learning curve to these guys, so if you're just starting out, it is definitely not going to be perfect. The first few sets that I put on, I ended up having to take off because the horse moved or I didn't time the gluing process quite right. And as you can see, even now, after several pairs of these shoes, I still do it pretty sloppily. But the most important part is that these are on correctly and they're going to offer him the protection that he needs while his feet are getting better. He did stand relatively well for me to be under him for this set of shoes, so maybe next time I'll reset them in the way that they were intended to be used. I will probably give these another day or two to set, and then I'll clean up all of this unnecessary glue and they will look a lot nicer. I didn't end up getting glue low enough down on the cuff, so hopefully that won't hurt the amount of time these guys stay on. Since I'm shooting for 4 weeks this time, I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference. With his shoes now securely on his feet again, I can finally get back into training Studman. If you're interested in seeing Studman being started under saddle, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.